Good morning, good afternoon, evening for those in India. Good morning for those in the US. Thank you for being here. My name is Amber Fessler. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist over here in the United States. I have a small private practice in South Dakota, and I see generally neurodivergent kiddos with co-related vision deficits. I finished my clinical doctorate, post-professional doctorate in 2020, but I've been an OT for 20 years. And my clinical doctorate, I did a specialty certification in remedial vision rehabilitation, which has completely evolved my OT practice and how I am working with my patients. And that's what I wanted to share with you all today, some of the things that I've encountered and experienced, and hope to share some information about vision and how we can help our loved ones with autism spectrum disorder. So welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. Let's go ahead and get started. So I think when everybody thinks about vision, oftentimes our first thing that comes to mind is visual acuity, or the ability to see 20/20, right? But really, vision, as the title suggests, is so much more than just what meets the eye. Vision actually accounts for 80% of our brain's processing. That's significant. That's huge. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to look at all of that 80% of processing and where that occurs and how all of that works. Vision isn't just for seeing things clearly or getting 20/20 vision. Vision is there for, first and foremost, our survival. That's one of the most important things that we do as humans. Our brain is there to help us stay alive. And vision is one of two distance receptors, the other being our auditory sense, that is there for threat detection, or taking in information in our environment that might potentially be a threat to us, to help just keep us alive. It is there to help us orient to time and space, to know where we are in space, where objects are around us, whether those objects are moving or if we are moving. Of course, it's pairing with other sensory systems like our movement system or our proprioceptive system, those coming from our joints and our muscles, to give us this information. But vision is an integral piece to this understanding of our space. It also allows us to anticipate complex motor movements and is going to help us with postural adjustments needed. When, for instance, we trip and fall, it's our visual sense that's picking that up very quickly and coming on board to give us information about how we need to adjust our body so that we can catch our fall long before other sensory systems are even on board. And we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. Vision, of course, is a key player in our learning and memory as well. Actually, 80% of a child's learning is done through vision. And then lastly, vision is incredibly important for communication and social interaction. We know that about 70% of our total communication skills comes from nonverbal gestures or nonverbal communication, which of course then is picked up through our visual sense. So lots of things that are going on other than just being able to see clearly, right? There's about 17 skills that come together, that have to come together to really give us what we call our functional vision. And that is above and beyond being able to see clearly, 20/20 vision, and to support all of those skill areas of survival, anticipation and adaptation, communication, learning, and spatial orientation. So some of these skills that we look at in regards to functional vision include eye movements. So we have a variety of eye movements that can help us out. One, fixation, just being able to hold our eyes steady on a target so we can derive meaning from what we're looking at. We have movements called smooth pursuits, and that's when we're tracking smooth moving objects. We have saccades, which are quick eye jumps that we use to scan our environment, or these are the movements that we use when we're reading across a line of text. And then we have vergence movements, and that's the eye movements going in and out. So in to see close, out to see at distance far away. We need to be able to eye team, excuse me, eye team and have binocular control over our eyes and our movements as well. So the coordination from our brain to our eyes to support those eye movements with both eyes moving together. Our focusing or our accommodation system needs to be able to change the shape of our lens efficiently and timely so that we can make images up close clear, or relax our accommodation out to make images in the distance clear. There's that visual spatial processing that I was talking about, knowing where we are in space, where objects are in relation to us or in relation to other objects in our space. We have our peripheral vision, which is our side vision, things that tell us where objects are in our space so that we can direct our eyes to them. Our depth perception and understanding and judging our space and how far away things are. And then, of course, our higher level visual information processing skills like visual discrimination, visual memory, visual closure, being able to identify an object when you can only see a portion of it, and visual motor integration skills. So I'm not quite sure I hit maybe 17, but it gives you an idea of what are all of the skills that we are looking at in remedial vision rehabilitation to support the best and most efficient use of our visual sense. And what we know is that in individuals with autism, there's high rates of comorbidity with vision deficits, of these functional vision deficits. There was a large population-based study released not long ago that looked at the prevalence of visual deficit comorbidity in children with autism. And I wanted to share some of those results that they found. They're a little shocking, I think. 42% of children with autism had a significant refractive error. So a refractive error is what we generally think about, right? That 20/20 vision, either being nearsighted or farsighted. And a significant refractive error means that they are unable to see things clearly. So when we look at that, 42% of children have a significant refractive error and they are unable to see things clearly. So when we're attempting to teach them things like social communication, eye contact, academic learning, and they are unable to see it clearly, obviously that learning is going to be difficult for them to take in. 22 to 57% of children with autism spectrum disorder have a binocular deficit, most commonly a strabismus or eye misalignment. And this is sometimes very evident when the eye is, one eye will turn in or turn out, or there can even be a vertical misalignment between the two eyes. A lot of times, like I said, this can be very evident, but sometimes that eye turn is very minimal and hard to pick up unless you are understanding and knowing what you're looking for when you're observing your students. And it doesn't have to be all the time. Technically, a strabismus can be a misalignment of the eye at least 1% of the time. So a lot of the times they may look like both eyes are on target and working well, but other times we may have an eye misalignment. And that just tells me that the brain is having some difficulty coordinating efficiently and over sustaining eye teaming skills. We have 19 to 31% of children with autism have amblyopia, what's more commonly known as lazy eye. Amblyopia is a decrease in visual acuity, most typically in one eye, because of a difficulty of coordination between the brain and the eye. Not that there's something wrong or going on with the eye itself, but that we have that brain and eye coordination. We have a question. Oh, I'm sorry, Krisha. Nope, not yet. I will share here just shortly when I get to that spot. Thank you for asking that question. So that is amblyopia, and that will also result in some binocular deficit and difficulty with eye teaming skills for the most efficient use of our vision. And then the last one is they have shown a diminished control of those saccadic eye movements, those quick eye jumps that we're using to scan and find salient information within our environment. And then, of course, not surprisingly, other things that are often reported are hyper or hyposensitivity to visual information. There was a study that looked at the qualitative experiences of adults with autism, and they had shared that sometimes they will have experiences of moving between periods of being hyper or overly sensitive to visual information and then going to under or hyposensitive and seemingly unexpected, which can be quite overwhelming, I would assume, and confusing to the brain. And so we can look at some of those maybe stereotypical behaviors that individuals with autism use as compensatory strategies for this hypersensitivity or hyposensitivity. So gaze aversion, right? That's one that's very, very typical in this population, and maybe a compensatory strategy to decrease the overwhelm the brain is experiencing by taking in all of this visual information and being so hypersensitive to it. And then that lateral gaze, that when we're turning our head and they're looking out of the side of their eyes. So actually a head turn can be a red flag for a binocular dysfunction. And it is a compensatory strategy that some people will use when they're experiencing maybe double vision or blurred vision and they're having a hard time getting both eyes to work together. They can block vision from one eye by turning their head and just using the one eye to look through. But also for kids with autism, it may be a compensatory strategy just to filter out how much visual information is coming into the brain and allowing them to more quickly and efficiently process that information when they are experiencing that hypersensitivity to vision and ease of overwhelm. So I want to go in and talk a little bit more specifically about these visual pathways, that 80% of brain processing. And so this is where I am going to share my screen so that I can, you can have a little bit of a visual to help explain all of this. So we have two primary streams, or think of them as highways, in which vision is processed in the brain. We have a dorsal stream over here in green and a ventral stream. Okay, the dorsal stream is kind of our where is it or how do I interact with it stream of information. This pathway has large cells called M cells that are going to take in information very, very, very quickly and send it through the brain for processing. And there's kind of two separate pathways within this dorsal stream. One is cortical and one is subcortical, or subconscious or preconscious processing of visual information. And then the ventral stream, again, I think the ventral stream is probably what a lot of people are thinking of when we think about vision. And this is our what is it stream. So this is where we're directing our eyes to look directly at something and derive meaning from it. And these take in information using smaller, more refined visual information through something called P cells. And they are far slower because they're smaller cells. And this pathway is cortical and within our conscious thinking brain. So let's look at this a little bit closer. I will give the caveat very first off, this pictures are very much oversimplified in terms of looking at these pathways. If we wanted to be more accurate, you could think of like a very large metropolitan area with lots and lots of highways and roads going every which direction and looping back around and roundabouts and all of the things. And that'd probably be a better depiction of what these pathways look like. But for the sake of today, we're going to use my homemade, very simplified depictions here. So this first one is our subcortical preconscious dorsal stream pathway, okay? So this is going to take in information from our eyes along that yellow line. It's going to go through something called the thalamus, which is like a relay station or an airport maybe, right? And it's going to say this is visual information coming up through these fast M cells, and it's going to send it on to the midbrain first. And the midbrain is going to be there to help give information about localizing it and getting our eyes and our head to orient to it. And then it sends it on to the amygdala. And if you're unaware of the amygdala, this is a significant part of our brain that is there for threat detection. The amygdala is taking in information and constantly asking, am I safe or not safe? Safe or not safe? And then it's going to make a very quick decision on how do I interact or engage. Do I move forward and engage with this target, or do I fight, or do I flee, or do I freeze? And this is all happening pre-conscious, before we ever think about it, before we ever have the chance to think about it. It is making those decisions for us. So it is primary for survival, right? So you can think of it as like, this is the pathway that's involved with you're walking down the road and you see a blur of motion in your side or your peripheral vision. And your amygdala is going to process that motion and make a determination on whether or not it is something that is a threat to your survival or is something that is safe and we can engage in encounter. Okay. In recent studies and theories that are coming out about the amygdala, it is also looking at not just threat detection, but being able to identify salient information. So what things should we attend to? Okay, so it is also this pathway that is going to help us with that anticipation, attention, and adaptation. So it is this pathway that I had given the example of if you're falling and need to catch yourself, it's this pathway that's going to recognize that. It's going to recognize the visual motion that occurs as you're falling, and hopefully either you're extending your back muscles and your neck to protect your head, maybe putting your arms out. And this is happening very, very, very quickly. And we can use this pathway to help anticipate changes in our environment and then adapt to those very quickly. And then surprisingly enough, this is the pathway that's involved with the development of communication and social interaction. So it's this pathway. Remember, we talked that 70% of communication is nonverbal communication. So it's this pathway that's picking up those nonverbal cues. Okay, so when we're interacting and engaging with someone socially, our brain is always watching for those little nonverbal cues, an eyebrow raise, a smirk of the lips, a shoulder shrug, smiling eyes. And that's going to help us to anticipate maybe what they're thinking or what they might say next, to help us to prepare then what we will say after that. This is what's going to allow for that fluid social interaction. So it's this pathway that's very quickly picking up on all of those little bits of motion and then directing our eyes very quickly through a reflexive saccade eye movement to help us to develop those communication skills. So this is the other stream for the or pathway for the dorsal stream. This is our cortical pathway. Okay, so this one's going to take in information from the eyes along through those M cells. Again, those big, large, fast cells. It's going to go through that thalamus, that relay station, say, yep, this is visual information. I'm going to send this one on to the visual cortex, the primary visual cortex, which is in the back of the brain, the occipital lobe. And then from there, one of the pathways is going to send it on to this area called MTV5. And this area is really, really important for motion processing. And has been an area that has been identified in individuals with autism as having some differences when they compare functional MRIs to neurotypical individuals. From MTV5, it's going to send that information up through the parietal lobe, where it will connect with other senses, which is our vestibular system, our tactile system, proprioception, information from our joints and our muscles, to know how to interact with our environment. How do I reach out and grab? How far away is my cup or pencil that I need to reach out and grab, and so that I can then utilize it? And then from there, it moves on to our frontal lobe for higher processing. So this is the pathway that's really going to help us with understanding our space. And this is, I would say, a foundational skill for everything that we do as humans. Everything, it tells us how to get our eyes to those salient information, where things are located. How do I reach out and interact with it? How do I find the person that I'm going to talk to? And so this pathway is super important for understanding all of that movement. Am I moving? Is the world moving? Where are my objects in space, and where am I? It's kind of like the you are here marker on a mall map. So when we look at these two together, here's the subcortical and the cortical pathways kind of overlaid on each other. And we can look at all of those skills that this dorsal stream pathway is really supporting. And in research, it is shown that this is a pathway that is different or has deficit in individuals with autism, which I don't think should necessarily be overly surprising, right? There's just not a lot of information out there about this pathway. So it's kind of maybe a hidden pathway, but let's look at that. So survival, we know that a lot of times individuals with autism have difficulty with the shouldn't say correct. Maybe their amygdala is not always identifying threats accurately. Like, what truly is a threat? Their amygdala might determine something to be a threat for their survival when it really isn't, right? That anticipation and attention, knowing what is salient, where do we need to move our eyes and pay attention? And then obviously the communication development and social interaction, and then the spatial orientation. In fact, some of the things, the stereotypical behaviors used to diagnose autism may be related to that spatial orientation. So when this dorsal stream isn't giving us very good information, we're going to use some compensatory strategies to help figure out our space, right? And we might use other sensory systems. So things like toe walking, hand flapping, or that finger flicking could be compensatory strategies that they're using to help themselves to understand the space that they're in. In fact, I will use the finger flicking and teach my kids that as a way to get them to turn on that peripheral vision, get this dorsal stream processing while we're engaged in something that we're working maybe on depth perception, and they're trying to figure out that space of where this object is located. So it is a tool that I will use to just turn on our space. And so that could be something that is happening in our children with autism as well. Okay, so this one is our ventral stream, right? So remember, our ventral stream is our what is it, vision for perception. It is coming in through those small P cells. It's going to come in through the eyes. The thalamus is going to say, oh, this is visual information. I'm going to send it to the visual cortex, the primary visual cortex, for processing. From there, it is going to go down through the temporal lobe and up front to the frontal lobe for that higher level visual processing and memory. So for things like that, visual closure, visual discrimination, visual memory skills. This is a pathway that's really going to derive meaning of what we are looking at. And what happens is that another compensatory strategy that the brain is going to use when the dorsal stream is not functioning well, the ventral stream is going to pick up the slack. So what does that look like? Inattentiveness. We are directing our eyes and using our eyes, our central vision, ventral stream vision, to try to detect threats within our environment. So we're going to be hyper vigilant. And it's going to appear inattentive. Excuse me, we might be utilizing that system to figure out our space better and know where things are, rather than being able to rely on that lower level peripheral vision. In fact, there was a study that showed and used imaging to look at individuals with autism and neurotypical age-related peers, and found that individuals with autism had faster processing time of their central vision coming in through this ventral stream than their neurotypical peers did. However, they also had delays in processing of peripheral vision. And so they are working, I would think, much harder through this ventral stream to overcome those deficits in the dorsal stream. Okay, so this ventral stream, learning and memory. Primary there for learning and memory. So the big question is then, what's next? What do we do next about this? I'm going to stop sharing here and go through the rest of this. So the first thing that I would recommend, of course, is that we want to start with a comprehensive optometric examination. A lot of times this is the first question that I'm asking my patients, and often the first recommendation that I'm giving. And there are some things that I want you to think about as you're looking at that, because I know sometimes you're thinking, my kid can't do a vision exam, or, oh, the pediatrician's office or the school provided the screening and they have 20/20 vision. But keep in mind, there are those 17 skills that we really need to look at to make sure that their vision is there to support the most efficient use for all of those skills. So we want to look at choosing the correct provider. I would suggest that you go look for a neuro-optometrist or a behavioral optometrist or developmental optometrist. And those are individuals that the title doesn't matter necessarily. That's kind of the foundation or framework that they're using to guide their practice. But they're going to have more information or more experience in schooling to know how to effectively assess all of those areas. I would look for a small single provider office. It would allow for probably be the only person in for an eye exam, or at least minimize all of the big sensory overwhelm by a big office. And then give suggestions to that optometrist. Give them a heads up that your child or loved one has autism, or you, and what would make that visit go smoother for you. You know, when you get your eyes checked, they're asking, which one's better? Is it one or two? Is one or two better? And sometimes that's really abstract. So ask them to change their language. Which one is sharper? Which one's brighter? Or are they the same? Sometimes they forget to ask that, or are they the same? And we get really anxious trying to figure out, should I be seeing one that's better than the other? I'm not really sure. So ask them to change that language. And ask them to make sure that they're explaining everything before it happens. A lot of times there's a lot of movement, you know, they're moving objects in front of the face. There's clicking in all of these noises as their machines are getting ready. And we know that unexpected sensory stimulation can be very overwhelming and upsetting to our nervous system. So if we have that anticipation through some verbal prompting, like this is about to happen, that our nervous system will handle that better. So think about asking them to do that. Look for some what to expect videos or resources. You could look at YouTube. The optometry office may have one on their site as well. So you can kind of gauge and learn, especially if this is a novel thing, on what might happen at that optometry visit so that you can better anticipate that. They have a, you know, they don't have to be able to come on and say, I have the language to say one is better or two is better. Optometrists have a lot of tools and skills to be able to look at that. They may have some trial and error. They may prescribe some glasses and then come back in 4 weeks or 6 weeks and double check it. And they may have to make some changes again, just based on behavioral observations, right? If you are concerned about this, there's some great checklists that you could use and complete and then bring into the appointment as well. That would help to limit maybe all of the questions that they might have and ask, which can be a little daunting to have to answer all of those questions. There's a couple that I really like, one called the Vision Impediments to Learning and Development, or the Convergence Insufficiency Symptoms Survey. These are self-reported questionnaires, and I will attach them to the comment section so that you have access to them or you can find them easily. Excuse me. And so those might be helpful, but if you have a younger child or a child that does not have great language and may not be able to self-report, there's also some behavioral checklists out there that you can fill out as a caregiver or parent, or have the teacher fill it out to help us to figure out what might be going on visually when they are not able to say what they're experiencing. And again, I will attach some of those to the comment section when we're finished today. So an optometry visit is a must. The school screenings, pediatrician screenings just really do not do it justice. And we really need to look at a comprehensive vision evaluation. So hopefully some of those tricks and tips will help you there. And then if you're a therapist or even just a parent looking for some more strategies, unfortunately, the research there isn't a ton about looking at specifically the dorsal stream processing and what the functional outcomes of therapy are with that. There's some case studies out there. There's some research that shows, you know, it's correlated with the severity of autism. So, you know, maybe a level 1 is going to have better outcomes than, say, a level 3. But some of the activities that you can target are things like increasing peripheral awareness. And I like to use sometimes, you know, with my younger kids or just lower functioning kiddos, I use flashlight tag. So we turn the lights off, they get a flashlight, I might have a laser pointer, and I'm using movement in their periphery for them to pick it up, and kind of grading that accordingly. A lot of times they enjoy that activity. but just having awareness of what is their peripheral vision doing? Can they pick up, and are they paying attention to things that come up in their side vision? Motion processing is another one. That's that MTV5 area that I talked about. And what the subcortical dorsal stream pathway is really paying attention to: motion and processing motion on our retina. And so I like to do a lot of movement activities on a swing or a rotating chair. And I'm sure you've probably seen it. Kiddos that like to spin and spin and spin all day long could sit and spin as fast as they possibly could, and then get up and walk away. What I also see with that is they never engage their vision. They either have their eyes closed or they're hiding their head, and their vision is never engaged with that. When I slow them down and I engage their vision, their tolerance changes drastically. So I will use very slow, controlled movement on a swing. And maybe I'm giving them beanbags to throw at a target, or a flashlight to light up a target as they're moving. But they get the opportunity to see visual motion along with their body movement for that spatial orientation. And then I'm going to add a lot of other sensory components to support that integration. So things like auditory, or tactile and proprioceptive, that motor component of throwing things at a target or lighting them up with a flashlight. And then the last one is just really paying attention to posture and looking at some of those foundational skills. We have to have good posture for our eyes to work efficiently. So ensuring that we have good postural stability and core strength, and balance activities. And balance, remember, is going to really rely on that spatial orientation. So we're using that ambient visual system. We're using our vestibular or movement system, and the information coming in from our joints and our muscles. And of course, all of my balance activities will have a visual target. And I might be asking them to shine a flashlight or throw at a target while they're doing that. So lots and lots we went over. I think there was a question. Maybe not. So if there's questions, please jump on, ask any questions that you have. If you're watching this later on the video recorded one, ask the questions. Autism Connect will reach out to me. I will also be on Facebook and watching for any questions to pop up and be able to answer those. You can reach out to me on my Facebook page, Vision in Motion Occupational Therapy. They will connect that handle in the comment section as well. But I sincerely hope that you found some nugget of information helpful today, and that you can maybe look at your loved ones with autism through a slightly different lens. Thank you again to Autism Connect for the invitation to speak today. I enjoyed it. I always love talking about vision. Let's see. Dawn is asking, where can we find more about trainings on vision in pediatrics? Hi, Dawn. Thank you for coming today. So we have, there's a lot of courses out on PESI. There's a gentleman called Robert Constantine who does a lot of really great courses on pediatric vision and adult vision deficits. A lot of his courses are through PESI online. We are doing a big vision conference coming up in March in Florida. So if you can join us in beautiful Gulf Breeze, Florida, we'd love to see you there. Or it is virtual as well. That is through Chow Seminars, and we can attach that too. It is going to be phenomenal. Lots of activity-based information. How can we really get in and target all of these different areas and ensure that we're meeting the best ability for that survival, spatial orientation, learning and memory, anticipation and adaptation and attention, kind of all of those areas that we're looking to target for vision. Are there any other questions that I can answer today? Or if you think of them later, again, put them in the comment section. I will be watching it. Autism Connect will be watching it, and we'll reach out if I miss it. Alrighty, it looks like no questions. We will go ahead and end this meeting here. Thank you again for joining me. I do appreciate it. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.